So for today, what we're discussing is revenue enablement. Obviously, that's your deep expertise, and just like how this is all changing given what's going on in AI. Like, it's disrupting a hell of a lot. It's empowering us a hell of a lot. And we just want to know, well, what does it actually look like? What does it mean?
It's perfect timing. I think if we had done this, even as early or as late, however you want to think about it, as like November last year, it would look completely different. That's actually the wildest thing. There was this real inflection point in December where a bunch of models got released and this kind of explosion of actual capability showed up across all sorts of tools. And what the nerds were tinkering on weekends is now, I think, what a lot of actual people working are doing on a weekday.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the most interesting place right now is not even in the specific SaaS vendors necessarily, where they're adding AI functionality, even though there's tons. I think the most interesting place is actually getting to a place where you're building maybe an autonomous agent or maybe just getting these CLI based agents going, and we'll work our way up to that in this conversation. I won't go straight to that. I think it's a little
Yeah.
bit
'Cause
jargon.
already, I think if you're saying CLI, like that's not a
Yeah.
term revenue enablement leaders needed to know a few months ago, right? Like
No.
that is a term
No.
that the engineering and the product team would have known. No one in sales, unless you were selling GitHub, knew what CLI meant.
And I had just for being a bit of a nerd, had a bit of a sense of that, but I didn't know what I was doing at all. I arguably still don't. I also think it's transitionary. I think we'll go back into a more polished product, and we're already seeing some, and I'm going to show one today actually. But for the most part, the most power right now is sitting in those kind of agents in the terminal. So
And I think
yeah,
that's
we'll
a,
work our way up into that.
I think that's a good thing to know if you're an executive watching this. Like, you don't have to. All of these tools are building towards making the graphical user interface and the user experience really simplified.
Yeah.
6 months ago, prompt engineering was a thing, and most execs were saying, "Hold on, if I can use AI, I tell AI what I want, and I tell it to give me a prompt." And then I use that prompt back into AI. Surely I could just tell it what I want in plain English and it can prompt itself. And that's what we're kind of seeing now, right? Prompt engineering is already almost a thing of the past.
It's definitely becoming less critical. There are some things where I want to run a deep research query, and I'm like, help me write the most optimal one. But for most things, the models are so smart now. It's
Yeah.
fine. The other part is just giving context. Like context engineering, I think, is the new prompt engineering for sure.
100% context and
So
managing context. And I think that is probably the perfect segue into revenue enablement, because this is all around the right context and the relevant context for reps to have at the right time, for them to know what to say when, for sales leaders to have context of what the team is doing and how they're doing it and where there's opportunities for performance improvement. All of the scope, I think context is maybe the perfect segue into what the hell's going on in this world of AI and how does this actually help us build revenue with our team.
totally agree. So I think on the enablement front, there's kind of like two places. There's the actual productivity of the enablement team.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's how do you drive better productivity across the go-to-market team, increase RGA, all of the RGA time, take away admin, make it more effective, more efficient. And both of those things just benefit tremendously from like really clear context and access to the right files. And it's actually why the first thing I want to share today is an agent that I have running in Notion. It's not about Notion. In fact, I want to be really clear about this. They've got a really kind of elegant solution here. But what I want to get across is it's not about Notion. I think the way they're thinking about it is correct, and you can then apply it everywhere else.
Great. Well,
So
I'll just
yeah,
start sharing your screen just so if you
yeah,
want to
do that.
hide any WhatsApps from your wife.
No, you're fine. I'll start with one that's already built, and then we'll build one together actually. So I'm just in Notion here. They've released these new custom agents. I've had access to them for a while. I've been running it for a little bit. And I've created one that I call Bob, as in Bob the Builder, because he's an IP builder for me. And so if you're an internal enablement professional, it's like there's always these sometimes requests for ad hoc training and artifacts and whatnot. There's conversations that happen between, say, sales leaders and reps. There's all of this like transfer of knowledge and information. And for me, I have an AI, like a note taker that exists all the time on all of my calls. And part of what I'm doing at the moment is giving advice. And so I'm now capturing that advice with an agent. And so to set it up, it couldn't be easier. I give it, and this is where I think where Notion have nailed how to think about building agents is the primitives to an agent are triggers. So what makes the agent, like what makes it actually start doing work? What are the instructions for the agent? What tools do they have access? Like what tools do they have that they can use and what access do they have? And so in this particular case, this runs daily, or when I trigger it, it is been given the job to go and listen to my calls that are being added to a Notion database in this particular case, pulled out of Notion and put into a database. And then if I just hit back on this
And,
into here,
and just to jump in here, Notion has its built-in call recorder, but you can use Granola. You're a fan of it, but
yeah,
really these days, however
you
you're
could
recording your
use
calls doesn't really matter, right?
Gemini transcripts, and that's why I said like I'm showing this in Notion because I think the way they're thinking about it is elegant, but the idea is much better. Like, can I find something that would trigger it? I can add triggers like time and access to something, someone mentioning an agent, fine. Can I give it really clear instructions about what to do when that's triggered? And then can I give it access? And so in this case, I've given it access to my Notion, I've given it access to my Slack, I've given it access to Granola in this case with the recordings, but it could be anything. And I want this one to be really smart. So I've given it Opus 4.6 access. Now, what it does is it then creates new content for me inside of a database. So you can see here it triggered, it went through a bunch of conversations that I've had. It then kind of built out some stuff. And eventually, let me just go into this here. I think that's filtered. Yep. I've got a filtered list here of some entries because I don't want to show all of them necessarily. But what I've got here is, let's say, like probe for signing authority. I inevitably got into a conversation about that. And so this particular page, it pulls out the principle. It speaks about why it works, talks about when to use this principle, how to execute it, like actual phrasing that you might want to use, what to look for, how to distinguish between implicit and actual authority. And then it's got this illustrative example because I have asked it to build that. Now, for my purpose, this is for me to make content later and IP and artifacts and whatever else. But enablement teams internally can be way more dialed in actually being able to do this like on the fly and always running. So this actually runs like 5 a.m. every day, I think. You could set it up weekly. And you could actually be feeding a central place for like all training that happens in an organization, product meetings that happen, go to market project meetings. And you could be feeding that into a centralized place and then setting up an agent that then looks at that central place, has a set of instructions to do something with that, and then goes and does the work based on the tools that it's got. So this is a pre-built one. I hope it gives some ideas around like how others might use it. But for me, it just means I'm like now capturing things that take zero admin time now. I might be in a coaching conversation and think, oh, I really should create a template for this. Now I can just have that running in the background. And in fact, in a different example I want to share in a minute, we can create a presentation from some of this stuff.
Well, I'm keen to dive into that, right? Because the problem with revenue enablement, or not the problem, like the ultimate impact has to be on
Challenge.
changing human behavior, like changing your reps' behavior, how people are actually doing it on the job. So this has to be conveyed to them somehow. You obviously need all the right principles of like adult education and change management and everything else. But how do you actually create the content and deliver the content is being changed because of AI. I wanted to just add in here that these use cases that we're talking about obviously extend well beyond revenue enablement. Like marketing should be capturing every customer conversation, every upsell, every client, every product demo to elicit all of the questions that are asked. And that should be feeding the content generation engine for search engine optimization and what's put up
Yep.
on the website. I think the conversations and in general conversational intelligence has now come so far that in some ways what you can build yourself will never be as polished as a Gong. Like that has some really excellent use
Yeah.
cases and is incredibly strong for forecasting, the holistic revenue engine, all of that. But actually, when you build it yourself like this, all of these ancillary use cases that you can get out of it in some ways are better.
I think it actually, I'm the world's biggest Gong advocate. I think they're market leader for a reason. I wouldn't be canceling a Gong subscription anytime soon, even with the inbuilt AI functionality that's there. But they have API access. We can go and like extract some of this stuff out and do very specific things with it. And that I certainly would encourage. Yeah.
And just like for anyone watching this, that isn't in enterprise and isn't looking or necessarily ready to use Gong to build this out. So far, this for you would be Notion. Like for a single user, we're looking at
Yep.
Granola, which is like $14 a month, and Notion, which is like $14 or $20 a month. Like we're not talking
Something. Yeah. Yeah. It's
a
about
lot of
20 a
money,
month.
and you don't need a Notion license for every individual user. This is just for the revenue enablement leader, essentially. So like this is cheap.
I
This
mean,
is now in the category of
you
almost
don't need the
free.
granola. You don't even need the granola subscription. Like Notion does have it built in. I'll shout them out on that. So yeah, and like the other part of that part equation, Ricky, is like to build the actual agent is so easy, and I think it's good to show that workflow. Like I think I had this ready here. Let's say I wanted to create, and this is one I want to show people. Is like, let's say I'm going to give it a crappy prompt. You are CoachBot, a practical sales coach for this company called Acme Inc. Your job is to help sellers run better deals using Medic. Okay, I hit next. It's going to go off and start filling this out. I'm going to let it do that. But while it does that, I'm just going to, again, choose 4.6. I think it's the best. In this case, I'm not going to give it any additional connections for the moment. This trigger is going to do this. I'm going to live right now connect it to my Slack. So I think if you're in revenue enablement, know that you're probably in a company that has engineers writing code. They're on MacBook Pros where security have given them the tick to have stuff sitting locally, and they've got terminals running. And so I think you need to go and fight for that too. I think it's time. Probably some of the marketers too. I'm going to add it to my coach Slack channel that I already set up. And I'm going to add that as a trigger. So anytime it's mentioned, and it's just going to need access to not only read, but also reply. So you'll see here that while we were doing this, it went and wrote the instructions. I'm not going to update this, but you can see here, it's like how to respond. Here's a medic checklist. Here's the output format I want. In reality, you would spend at least 10 minutes. Like we haven't spent 1 minute, but let's spend 10 minutes writing some good instructions. Let's spend an hour. Let's give it access to our company value proposition and all of that kind of data that we want it to have. And if I actually switch to Slack, I think I can. It'll be okay. I'm in this demo, this coach thing here. I could just be like, again, I got a prompt ready. You know, this isn't even a good message because company code doesn't even exist. But now that I do that, I'm calling the agent that I just built. I should be getting now a little activity here that you can see. And back in Slack in a second, I'm going to get a threaded reply that's going to say, hey, yeah, I can help you with that, with getting a champion intro. So I'm just thinking about like, how do you scale the work of enablement? Previously, we might be running discrete training sessions or building an artifact. This lets you push all of that thinking and all of that work into like these repeatable things that can show up where people already are. And so I've got a reply. Here's the deal health. We don't have the info yet, but it says, here's some next steps. Test your champion. Give them a reason to make the intro. Offer to make it low effort. You can imagine how powerful this would be if I just gave it
Yeah,
1%
this is
context.
10 seconds worth of work, and probably what would have taken an enablement person 6 months to even get it this far not so long ago. So, and again, like
Wow.
you're using Notion here, there's plenty different ways to do this, but it's pretty remarkable, right?
It's absolutely wild. Now, to make the point of like not being in Notion, we can actually get out of here. So let's go like scale right up. I said CLI at the start, command line interface. That looks like this here. And I'll just, yeah, I'll just kind of minimize this a little bit so we can get it out of the way. I'm going to cover this Codex app for a second because we're going to jump in there. Claude Code is all the rage right now. The thing I'd want to call out, and I'll just zoom in a little bit here, is I'm just in a folder called presentations on my computer. I've got an app. I've opened the terminal. You don't have to be scared about it. I've installed Claude Code. I can be in this folder, and instead I can run Codex, which is OpenAI's version of it. I can be here and I can run AMP. This is another company's version of it. They're all doing the same job. They're surfacing those really smart models. onto your computer locally. And yeah, I can go and send off a prompt to go and do something. And this is really much more powerful. The reality is a lot of people aren't going to run this in the terminal. And I would say that now with stuff like Claude Cowork, I think they're calling it, I just don't use it, Codex, there are local, in this case, Mac apps, and there's a lot of Windows stuff coming that give you all of that terminal power, but inside something that is a little bit more like enjoyable to use. And I've got a really easy kind of workflow here that I think should hit home. So all I've done here is added a new project. Let me just click that one more time. And I've chosen the folder here, presentations, and I've got a bunch of like dummy data in there. So I'm going to create a new thread, which is what I've got already here. And instead of like sending it off into the terminal, I could say, hey, go look at, and I'll send this prompt off. I'm just going to leave this on maybe medium, so we're not sitting here for 10 minutes waiting for an answer. I'm going to send that off because I think enablement teams should be data driven. And so I want this to go and look and read some data. I'm going to jump into my Finder here, and I just want to show you the data that's there. So let's go analysis, deals last month. And this is just, is this appearing on the screen? I'm not sure. There we go. This is just a set of fake deal data that has 100 opportunities with seller names, which teams they're on, open and closed time, like standard stuff that you would be looking at and you should be looking at. I've then got a seller performance output, and this could have been from HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever. And it's just said like, hey, these sellers are winning at this rate. Here's the average deal value. Here's a pipeline, etc. And I've got a transcript from an enablement professional speaking with a sales manager in a kind of weekly or monthly cadence, let's say. And I want to marry all of this together so that I can understand this. And you can see here that all it's doing is going through those files that I gave it. It worked out that there was an analysis folder. It's loading the transcript. It's checking for trends. It's found the documents that we just talked about. And it's starting to understand what's there. And I want to get a response back here in a second. So what you can see here is what it's found is this pricing pressure that's accelerating. So it's not even static price pressure. We can see what have we got? Like it's gone from 19% of deal loss reasons to 54. It's probably a bit extreme. Win rate's gone from 40 down to 29% from December last year to February this year. And there's some segment patterns, and it's broken that down. So I've now got this data, and I go, okay, like great. I've pointed you to these files. Now you can imagine they could be in Google Drive, they could be somewhere else. Maybe I want to do something about that. Maybe my conversation with that manager was, yeah, okay, one of the interventions we'll do is some training. Well, all I've done here is I've got an API key out of Gamma. Gamma is a programmatic kind of presentation kind of builder. I'm going to, again, I just pre-wrote this because number one, I don't want to type on screen, but two, I didn't want to be the person pressing the button using Whisperflow like I normally would. And so I've actually said, hey, can you go look at this data that's in there and like go and build a deck in Gamma for me. And I want it to actually match the Acme Inc. theme. Now, while it does that, I want to show you guys two things, actually three. One, that you can do this all the way back in ChatGPT if you need to. Two, that it can go and look at context that we open this call with. And then three, it can actually adhere to the instructions that I have. So if we go back to this Finder, I've got some internal docs that are like, again, pretend. I also prompted Codex to just make me these pretend documents, by the way. And so here's another conversation. Here's a little bit about our ICP and the personas that we chase. Here's our sales methodology and how it's broken down. And so right now, Codex is going and looking at that. And you can just go and apply this back to a ChatGPT, a Claude Code, any of those kind of agent tools. And it's off busy working. Now, if I go to my browser and I go to Gamma, you'll see here that, and I've cleared this out for the sake of the demo. What I've created is a little Acme theme because I want all of my presentations to be brand compliant and ready to go. And so it's already got all these instructions. I pulled the theme ID out of here. It surfaces it for me. And I told Codex, I said, hey, write a skill file for creating presentations. Make sure that you always use this theme ID. Make sure that you make presentations this way. Make sure that you get the right context if you don't have it. You don't need to know how to do these things. You just tell the agent to do it. And it built a skill file in here. So what did I call it? Presentation builder. I've got this skill in here. It's got some information about how I like presentations built, when to use Gamma, and then it tells it, hey, use this theme ID, and so it'll do that. And so again, this is a demo one. Like these other ones are real, but this is a demo one. What we'll see in a minute is if I go back to Codex, it's off and it's saying, hey, maybe slowing down a little bit. No errors. It's working on it. Okay. I'm going to let it run for a little bit, see if it's working there. I would typically set it to high, but we'll see how we go with this. In any case, it was smart enough to use the presentation builder skill that I asked it to do. It is important to note, like, you just don't have to, you're not constrained by the tools other than maybe your security team. If you're in, let's say, a chat GPT, I just created a little, where should I do this? I'll go to settings here, apps, and then Zapier. You'll see here, I created a connection to Gamma using Zapier originally. You could connect it to other tools. So if your team have already like allowed access to tools like this, you don't have to do it in the command line is what I'm trying to get at. You can work around it by using some of the like more readily approved apps that you probably have. And you can connect things. And so like in my case, I went to Zapier and I said, hey, go and connect to Gamma for me. And then I just got the way to connect it and I followed the instructions. And I could do the exact same thing inside of ChatGPT, prompting it and say, hey, make me the presentation here, just the same. So I think I've killed enough time. Let me see if Codex has actually worked out how to do its job here, because it'd be cool to see it. It looks like it has. It's generated it. It's given me a link to it. I'm not going to use the link. I'm just going to jump over to Gamma, and you'll see I've got this little API generated thing here, and you can see this deck that says pricing pressure is real, but can we win with whatever it says with method? And so it's gone ahead and it's built that to the theme that I wanted. It's pulled in some of the data, which is great. It's telling me all of this information. Like, we've done one version of this, but can you imagine if you just set this up to always be looking at this data and then programmatically building these things in the background? And so, like, if I'm an enablement professional and I need to do a weekly status report and I want some of that data, I can do it. If I want to build content for onboarding, I can give it all the context, all of the role stuff, all of the outcomes that I need. And I could build 100 presentations today if I wanted to.
You could
While
customize
like,
this to individual deals, to your reporting up.
exactly.
Like it is, I mean, beyond powerful to say like, take the context. And as an enablement professional, like you are still critical in this because you're deciding what kind of information is needed and when, because just we've all seen this with conversational intelligence. We're all like, ooh, amazing. We're going to record every meeting. Then what happened? Reps stopped taking notes. They stopped thinking about their deals. They lose context. They don't even know. They're using,
Or an autopilot.
they're on autopilot. They're using these GPT written follow-up messages. Like the reps made themselves just down to this AI average. So like how to orchestrate this is becoming more important. But if you don't know how to leverage these tools, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I think I opened with this. 5 years ago, I spun up an enablement team. It was just me, and then built it into a team. And I think if I walked into a business today and spun up an enablement function, very few of the principles would have changed, but like almost every part of the execution would. Because imagine running up against a team who has like competitive intelligence, like on like absolutely firing, has onboarding that's automated down to the individual, has training that's responsive to exact teams that are data driven. There's just like, I don't know how your competitors are going to run rings around you. And so, yeah, I don't know of a version of running really high quality enablement now, even with headcount, by the way, right? It's like, I don't think you solve this with head, like grow a team still, but make them 10x more effective.
Yeah, I think this really does change the headcount. It changes the skills that your team members need. On some ways, you need better strategists, better true academic professionals. And then on the other extreme, you need far more tech-enabled executors because one
Yep.
person can do what was previously impossible, even with a team of 100. I think some parts are never going to change. Actual AI supporting and coaching is great, but human to human stuff, presentation, like
100% agree.
there's still parts that aren't going to change. So maybe even whilst we're talking about AI, and I'm sure you've got a bit more to show us, are there, well, first of all, let me ask, is there more that you wanted to show or can we?
I don't think we need to. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's just like the headspace for me is how do I get agents working for me? I think that's probably the primary thing that I'm thinking about at the moment. And the primitives to that are what's the trigger,
Mhm.
right? What are we responding to? What are the instructions that they have? And have I thought about all of the kind of edge cases and whatnot? And what tools and access can I give them? And then just like context, 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 can't drive that any harder. I think that's the kind of the primary thing.
Yeah. A few things that have come to mind lately for me when it comes to enablement. The first is that I think sales enablement is, I mean, I hate these terms like sales enablement is dead, but I think given the way this is, the professionals that are doing this function would by default just scale up to all of revenue. Like you're not going to build all of these
Yeah,
things for sales and then just ignore post sales and just ignore the same workflow
exactly.
being pushed to marketing. So I think it's really like sales enablement now has to just become revenue enablement, unless there's very
Yep.
bespoke, like within revenue, you might have sales because someone's really focused on your outbound BDR team because you're running this big international operation and there's
Oh, yeah, you can have
huge outputs.
specialization, but functionally as a business to resource it, you have to think revenue from the start. You have to think GTM. Like my headspace is actually mentally look at the bow tie, diagnose all the way across the bow tie. What are the behaviors that need to exist there? What are the data points I need to have? And then how do I respond to them? And then equip every part of that kind of value chain with things that make them more effective, take
Yeah.
away admin work, all of that stuff.
Now, I also think there's a lot of parts of this that are untested. The first is that we normally fall into this trap when with emerging technology of people building what's possible. And you'll build things because you can, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. I think
Yep.
the strategic design, the architecture, the the less is more. Like often we'll fall into this trap of like, what more can I add? What more can I add? What more can I do? As opposed to like actual good thinking, which is like, what's the least that can be done to achieve this outcome? And I think we're going to fall into that trap a lot. Zach said, why are you looking at me when you say that? We all technophiles. Well, we're not all, but we fall into this trap a lot. And I haven't met a person yet that hasn't built out the most robust Notion ecosystem, operating system that they haven't abandoned because it was too hard to manage. And we've all been there. So I think there's a big chunk of this moving from what's possible to what's a good idea. How do people stay on top of this, Nathan? Like this is moving quickly. People are testing, they're iterating, they're trying things, and it turns out to be a bad idea, or they're trying things and it turns out to be a good idea. Certainly, a lot of people
Yep.
selling products, and so it seems as though it's a good idea. Like, how are you thinking about staying relevant?
And it's kind of a two-speed thing. One is there's the respond to the actual most important thing in the business right now, right? So like, what's a blocker to us hitting our goals? And like, let's stay really super commercially focused on that and not get too distracted. And that is where I think you can be very targeted in the response. And then the second speed is, I don't even want to say this, but like, I would be lying if I wasn't also messaging Zach on a Sunday saying, "Hey, have you seen this? I just spent 2 hours messing around with this thing, and now this is possible." And I'm not necessarily saying work the weekends, but I am saying carve out some time. And like, I would run not important experiments in a sandboxed way with data that isn't sensitive, prove stuff out, and then start bringing it back into production. But yeah, I think yeah, the lesson is more message is good, but I think it should be focused on like
Yeah.
the commercial reality and let's just go and tackle those things.
Y-
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing though, Ricky. Like
Yeah.
just not outputting everything to the AI.
Mm.
As much as I just showed all of this stuff, you need to have a very heavy hand in the discernment of like, okay, is this actually good? Is this the right advice?
Yeah.
But it's like the worst thing you could possibly do is 100x bad things. You
Yeah.
know, it's like
100%.
let's scale shit is
And
not the correct answer.
also I think where we talking about this, small to medium businesses could adopt this tomorrow. Like if you're a small
Yep.
business, if you're a founder, the odds are so stacked against you to succeed that you have to leverage every tiny piece of alpha that you can get. Yes, you can wait until the graphical user interfaces are super slick and it's easy to do, but you almost need to be on the CLI on your command line interfaces, like to just to exploit every alpha you can for as long as you can. When you get to the mid market, I think this is where people really have this power, where you've got capabilities, you've got resources, and I see the challenge at the moment moving into enterprise where like they're restricted on what AI they can use. Like their bureaucracy is holding them back. And so this really is a challenge in the enterprise space where you need to just wait for your gong to build this as a feature and for that feature to be out of beta for your organization to be satisfied with
Yep.
it. But if you're not in that enterprise space, like this is the time to catch up.
Totally agree. If you are in that enterprise space, my argument would be, again, particularly if it's a tech company, if you have a team that is writing code in your business, there has been a set of clearances that have been made in the way that they use their computer, unlike the standard group of people at work who just have to stick within the SaaS apps. And in that, I would go and try and at least say, hey, what does this entail? How do I get approved to use this? Yes, it has to be within these bounds. Yes, it has to be constrained to whatever auth I have. Nothing can go into some production workflow until it's been approved by house security. Yes, I can only use the Google models because we're a Google shop. Fine. It doesn't matter. Like there's so much powerful stuff out there. I think it's still worth the fight. And I would go, hey, can I go and just fit into some of the motions that have been to get set up for approvals for a typical software engineer, but without having to touch any software engineering like databases or
Yeah.
anything.
And just to
Yeah.
be clear, like almost all of this can be built entirely in-house on local AI if you had to. Like there
Yeah.
for this context, there's plenty available. So Nathan, let's cut it there. I think like this was
Cool.
been incredibly insightful, lots of food for thought. Even I'm amazed at I've got a Notion license, but I don't use it to build my agents. It's getting really easy. For anyone watching this, our answer to the question, how do we all stay cutting edge, is there's a whole group of sales enablement and revenue enablement professionals. They're in a WhatsApp chat, in a community, just sharing updates on what's working, what's not working, what they're trialing, what mistakes they've made and the like. And to me, that's really is the only way to stay on top of it. I've tried Instagram. There's just too much crap. I need some like honest reporting on like what's really working. So jump into the community, just to stay up to date. I mean, like mute it and read it when you're bored. Like,
Yeah.
so
There's some great people in there.
yeah.
I would say jump in for sure.
And other than that, connect with Nathan, because I think if you're just walking in his shadow, you'll probably be fine.
It's very kind. But yeah, hit connect, say hello. Always happy to help.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone that's joined. We'll see you in the community. And we do these every Thursday, different topics from revenue enablement, partnerships, go-to-market engineering, AI side. We've got some product demos coming up. It's really just for the community. It happens to be on LinkedIn Live because some people prefer that, but we usually just pull them down off LinkedIn Live a week later. Anyway, so jump in and we'll see you all soon.